This is the video for Mod 7 Lesson 3, Angles on the Coordinate Plane. The goal for this section is going to be to sketch angles on the coordinate plane that are in standard position. To determine a coterminal angle, or what does that mean, and then determining what a reference angle is. Okay, so a couple of terms that we're going to see here. So one is talking about standard position for an angle. And so when we start talking about sketching angles on the coordinate plane, it starts looking at the idea of having angles that are greater than 180, because we haven't really seen that yet, and angles that maybe are less than 0. So those are kind of the two ideas that we can do when we're talking about the coordinate plane. So how this works is an angle needs two rays. We typically start at the origin, and the first ray that goes with that angle, that's going to be what we call our initial side. So notice it's lying on the x-axis between quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. When we label our angles, if I don't move from this position, this is 0 degrees, and we always move counterclockwise when we talk about an angle. And I can move infinitely counterclockwise when we number this out. So when I go, so every time I move between a quadrant, that's 90 degrees. So between in quadrant 1, that's between 0 and 90 degrees. If I decide to make an angle from that initial side and go around, that would be 180. If I add another 90 degrees, that would be 270. And if I come back around, that's going to be 360. So I can make angles kind of going around as many times as I want. I'm going to erase this to kind of clean it up a bit. So basically, when we have an angle, we have two sides or two rays that form the angle. Like I already said, the initial side, and the vertex is always at 0, 0, lies on the x-axis between quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. The terminal side is the other side to the angle. So like, let's say if I draw an angle that's between 90 and 180, maybe this is like 120. You can see that angle, the other side of that would be the terminal side. And the angle actually ends up lying in, we would say it lies in quadrant 2, right? Because we always name it by the terminal side, and that's this side right here. So we would say that 120 is in quadrant 2. Okay, you're also going to see what says coterminal angles, and this should be coterminal angles. And these are angles that are in standard position, but what happens if we see angles where they're bigger than 360 or they're less than 0? And we're going to see some examples of that in a moment. But basically, we're sketching angles on the coordinate plane. All right, so the first example is asking you to sketch 290 degrees. So when we go ahead and label this out, we have our, this is 0 degrees, this is 90 degrees, this is 180, and 270, and then finally 360, right? So we just go in a circle. We always start with our initial side. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sketch 290 degrees. So we can see if I name these quadrants out, because it sometimes makes it a little easier. And that's naming the quadrants is probably something you remember from Math 1. We're going to see, well, where does 290 degrees fall? And 290 degrees is going to fall in quadrant 4, right? Because 290 is between 270 and 360. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch an angle. And I'm going to label it, this is 290 degrees. And so that's how I would sketch a 290 degree angle. For the next one, I have negative 200 degrees, and that kind of goes into the other term we saw, which was called a coterminal angle. Coterminal angles is basically, if we think about it in terms of a circle, right? I can go in a whole bunch of different directions. So if I have a negative, I can actually add another circle to a revolution around the circle. So if I add 360 degrees, I get 160 degrees. So really, I'm going to be sketching a 160 degree angle. So anytime you have a negative, you're going to go ahead and add 360 until you get something that is between 0 and 360. So again, I'm going to have my initial side. 160 is in quadrant 2, so it's between 90 and 180. And this would be 160. And just so you can kind of see, negative 200 would be like if I want the, it's like if I want reverse direction. So this is like negative 200 degrees. So that's why it's much easier to sketch the coterminal angle. So if it's a negative, you're just adding 360, and you're adding that until you get something between 0 and 360. The other topic we're going to look at is talking about reference angles. So reference angles is essentially making right triangles on the coordinate plane. Right? Because we know how to do a lot of things with right triangles. We're essentially making a right triangle with the terminal side and the x-axis, right? So that's really kind of what we're doing. We're forming an angle with the terminal side and the x-axis, and we'll see how this looks in a moment. But basically, everything kind of revolves around the x-axis with these. And the goal is we're going to end up making right triangles. So in this first example, we have 120 degrees. I'm going to go ahead and first sketch a coordinate plane. So I have 0, I have 90, 180, 270, and then 360. I can see 120 degrees, which we've kind of seen this example before. I have my initial side. 120 is between 90 and 180. And then we're looking for a reference angle. So a reference angle is if I take this initial, at this point, maybe a point here, and drop it straight down. If I drop it straight down, I'm going to make a right angle here. And it's really asking how many degrees is this angle right here. So we know the entire thing is 180. If this is 120, I can just subtract 120 from 180. So my reference angle is 60 degrees. So that's the angle that the terminal side makes with the x-axis. For the next one, same thing. I'm going to go ahead and sketch 200 degrees. So if I do my same labeling, you could see 200 if I'm starting here. Ends up being in quadrant 3. So if I take a point on there and make a right triangle with the x-axis, I always make it with the x-axis. I'm looking to see how many degrees is that reference angle. So we have that this is 200 degrees. I want to know this piece right here, so I can actually, I know that this half is 180. So if I do 200 minus 180, I get 20 degrees. And so my reference angle is 20 degrees. So again, what we're doing there is, it's not always just memorizing, are we adding, are we subtracting? You're looking how the angle falls in the quadrant. And if it falls in quadrant 3, you're going to be subtracting 180 because it's bigger than 180. If it falls in quadrant 2, you're usually going to be subtracting the number from 180. So you can see it's a little different. And then the last example, same thing. I'm going to go ahead and sketch 270 or 290. And you can see it's going to fall between in quadrant 4. And so if I was to make a right triangle with that, I can do, I can see that it's bigger than 270, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and, I know it's not a complete circle, I can subtract from 360. And this little piece here is going to be 70 degrees. So my reference angle would be 70 degrees.
If you have questions from the notes, please make sure you're asking questions in class, during T-Bolt time, or in the center. You do need to complete the U-Tries to receive full points for these video notes. So when these are checked in class, you do need to make sure you have your U-Tries completed to receive full points. So again, the remaining problems from this section need to be completed. Even if they're not perfect, we need to see that you're trying the steps out before you come to class so you're ready to ask questions. All right, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.